Welcome, everyone. Glad you could join me here today on episode 2399 of the Cabral Concept. Today, we are going to share with you the absolute best time of the day to drink your coffee or tea or other caffeinated beverage, and all the pros and cons of having it before food, after food, with food, and also where you're getting the majority of your caffeine from. So hopefully today is a fun show. As I always say, do feel free to share the show with anyone you believe it could serve. Really looking forward to getting into today's topic. Again, most of the topics for every single show, you know, it's a daily show here on the Cabral Concept, come from our community. So anytime you have a suggestion for a show, just leave it inside of cabralsupportgroup.com. The amazing Michelle sends along all of your suggestions. And oftentimes they become their own show, such as this one. All right, so let's dive right into it. You know, it's interesting because caffeine is something that we've been using now for thousands of years, for sure, as humans. It's gotten more and more, I would say, processed over the years, so much so that we actually know the chemical compound and we can actually make it into a pill now, which some people use. It's much more dangerous that way. It really is, because there is an upper limit to caffeine, and it could cause severe cardiovascular or stroke or other issues when taken to excess. But the actual chemical compound is 1,3,7-trimethylxanthine. So, you know, if you're ever at a party and you want to throw that out there as some, you know, useless knowledge, you are absolutely welcome to. But the thing about caffeine is that the more you know about it, because do keep in mind, it is a drug. Some people classify it as a drug, and others classify it as a supplement. But no matter how you look at it, when we are using it from nature, we're actually absolutely using it as a supplement. Same with tea, right? Like we're using it to get a benefit out of it to supplement our diet, because you certainly don't need to, you know, eat coffee beans or tea leaves in order to be a healthy human. However, there are many health benefits to it, and I've talked about that in the past. That's why I'm not going to go over today's show if coffee, you know, breaks a fast, or I have lots of shows on that, and I'm going to try to link them up for you here today. And by the way, whenever I say coffee today, assume I mean anything with caffeine, black tea, etc. So I'm going to link everything up today, previous podcasts that you may not have checked out before, at stephencabral.com/2399. Okay, so I'll go over this. I'm going to go over the caffeine sources first and then how it affects our body. Okay, so about 1 8-ounce cup of coffee. Now, I know almost no one in the world drinks an 8-ounce cup of coffee, right? It's usually 12 ounces. That's the smallest that most Dunkin' Donuts, Starbucks, any place will give you. It's basically 12 ounces. So it's 1.5 cups if we're looking at the literal sense of how they look at it. Because in an 8-ounce cup of coffee, it's about 95 milligrams of caffeine. Let's just say 100 because it's easier for math, right? So what's 1.5 that? 150 milligrams. All right. So that's what a Dunkin' Donuts coffee is. That's what a normal, like, New England coffee is. But Starbucks is almost twice that. So for their tall, it's 272 milligrams of caffeine. That's a lot, right? So a normal cup of coffee, you make it at home, small mug, 8 ounces, about 100 milligrams. Most people's cup of coffee, about 150. If you make it strong, okay, then we're looking at more like 200 to a Starbucks, which is like 300, which is very, very strong. Espresso's not as strong. So one shot of espresso, but 1.5 ounces is 65 milligrams of caffeine. Honestly, it could be anywhere from 50 to 75, but it's less than coffee. So just to let you know that. And I have a podcast that I hope you do check out. It's the healthiest way to brew coffee, because espresso, believe it or not, is not the healthiest way to brew coffee. I share with it on that show. A cup of black tea, anywhere again from 50 to 70 milligrams of caffeine. Soda is going to vary wildly. It could be anywhere from 50 to 100 milligrams of caffeine. It depends if it's like Coca-Cola, Pepsi, maybe on the lower end, to something like Mountain Dew or Jolt or something like that, which may have more, right? Okay, so chocolate. A lot of people are eating chocolate and not knowing that there's caffeine in that, right? Now, typically, I shared this actually on yesterday's show with high antioxidant foods, but chocolate, the higher the percentage, meaning greater than 70%, the better it is for you in terms of antioxidants, but also the higher the caffeine amount. And in a 1 ounce, only 1 ounce of chocolate's not a lot of chocolate, but 1 ounce of chocolate contains about 24 milligrams of caffeine, right? Where milk chocolate has about a quarter of that. Why? Well, there's about a quarter of the chocolate in it. That's why. Like, so again, these things, I think sometimes they try to create like shrouds of mystery around them. No, it's the more chocolate, pure chocolate you actually have, well, the more caffeine you're going to have. So just keep in mind, having chocolate before bed, not the best idea. Okay. I'm not going to get too much into other types of like energy drinks because honestly, they vary wildly. Could be most energy drinks that I've seen are 200 milligrams. I've seen some that are now going to the lower end at 100 milligrams, which I really like. I think 100 milligrams, if you're going to do an energy drink, that won't spike your adrenaline to the degree that a lot of these others will, that I'll be talking about in one moment. But most have 200 to 300 milligrams of caffeine. So again, you can get them in supplement form. Typically, supplemental caffeine inside of a white pill is going to be 100 to 200 milligrams. And they typically will never go above that. And the reason is that the upper limit that is recommended for people for caffeine today is somewhere between 200 and 400 milligrams of caffeine a day. It used to be, I believe, 300. I believe that they've recently raised it to 400. I think we want to be careful with that upper limit number, but that's equivalent to about 2 small coffees per day, right? So that's what it is. 2, I believe, is that 2? Well, it's 4 8-ounce coffees per day. So that's 32, and 2 12s is 24. No, so it's going to be like 2.5 of like your, not Starbucks, but let's say a Dunkin' Donuts. But again, that's the upper limit. That doesn't mean you should reach the upper limit. It just means like that's the upper limit tolerable for safe caffeine. Now, I will say that caffeine is really never safe ever for pregnancy. It's not. And that's because women don't actually metabolize caffeine as well when they are pregnant. And during their last trimester, I believe the half-life of caffeine is anywhere from 6 to 9 hours, depending on your genetics. Could be even shorter if you're a fast metabolizer of caffeine. But for women, while pregnant, I believe it's like 15 hours it takes them to actually metabolize caffeine out of their body in their last trimester. So be really careful with that. I can't recommend it. Can't recommend it for children either. Children, basically non-teenagers. Can't recommend caffeine at all. And anybody who has anxiety, worry, nervousness, overwhelm, more of a catabolic body type, more of a vata body type, or if you get an accelerated heart rate, you don't want to be drinking caffeine at all, like at all. You can do decaf. In decaf, there's still anywhere between 5 and 10 milligrams of caffeine per cup, but obviously it's very, very low. However, sensitive people may still feel that as well. All right, so super important. Last couple things. Before I just give you the when to have it, because I think all of this helps, that caffeine has a peak about 45 minutes after you drink it. All right, so say you consume it at 8 a.m., about 8:45 a.m., it's hitting that peak, and it will stay elevated at that peak or pretty close to it for up to 2 hours. And again, it depends on your genetics and how quickly you metabolize caffeine, how well your liver's working, to be truly honest with you. So you have your genetics and you have your liver, because caffeine actually has to be broken down through the conjugation pathways in the liver. I won't get into that today. If you want to know more about detoxing, you can go to stephencabral.com/ I believe it's detox-course. It's a free course. Or just go to stephencabral.com/courses. It's a free course on how your body detoxes, which is like one of the most important things that you could absolutely learn. So definitely check that out. All right. So now that you know caffeine spikes about 45 minutes after you drink it, that you really don't want more than a couple hundred milligrams per cup of coffee, or maximum for the day, you want to think about, okay, well, how can I consume this to get maybe the benefits that I want without putting too much stress on my nervous system and HPA-Axis, which affects your adrenals, and it affects your thyroid as well. So you want to look at it like this. Caffeine can increase adrenaline, it can increase norepinephrine, it can increase cortisol. And that's why I have a podcast saying, does coffee break your fast? Because for many people it does, because you don't even have to eat food. If you spike your stress levels, caffeine can do that, then your body will produce more glucocorticoids, which is cortisol. And this can be measured. You can actually run this lab right at home, doing the stress, mood, and metabolism test, or even just a single cortisol. And again, you can find those at stephencabral.com/labs if you want to check out how to run those right at home. Pretty easy, straightforward to do. So I think that that is really beneficial to start to know your own body. And if it spikes your own blood sugar, you can just use a simple glucometer right at home. Or if you want to get more in depth, of course, you can use a continuous glucose monitor for a month or so to be able to track your actual levels of consuming caffeine. But I've recommended this for many, many years now. And it's truly more of an Ayurvedic-based approach. And caffeine, and I just put up an Instagram video on this not too long ago, maybe a couple weeks ago, if you're following along on social media, that anytime I consume coffee or caffeine, it's always after a meal. And I've taught this to my clients now for many, many years. So the reason why I recommend having caffeine after the meal, if you're going to have any caffeine at all, is that it blunts the stress effect on the body, which means you're not going to get the same degree of cortisol or adrenaline or norepinephrine spike. And number two, it actually aids in digestion, right? So there's two things that happens. So, well, I should state that the only way that you would slow down the digestion and absorption of the caffeine would be food in the stomach. But it has to be not just any ordinary food. It would have to be protein and fiber. So again, I've talked about this on a previous show on like just looking at your diet and looking at your protein and fiber-based intake. Not going overboard, but really looking at those two things. And let me see if I can find it for you. It's episode 2385. I talk about this, not in regards to caffeine, but really it's in regards to overall health. Because what's happening is you're improving satiety through the thermogenic effect of food, meaning like food that's a little harder to break down. And certainly that's going to be protein. And then, fiber also helps with that digestion as well. So and again, I won't get into fiber today. I have lots of podcasts on fiber. So what I want you to think about is this. If you are consuming coffee on an empty stomach, almost no doubt about it, you are increasing your nervous system stress levels. You're putting yourself in a state of fight or flight. So I would consider coffee and caffeine, and again, put in tea or energy drinks there, guilty unless proven otherwise, meaning like that it's not actually doing that to your body, because that's its job. The reason why you get that alertness, the reason why you get that focus or that energy is because you're actually spiking stress levels in your body. You're pushing your body more towards a fight or flight. That's also why I say be careful with the amount of caffeine you take in. You really want to take in what I would consider the minimal dosage for best results. So for example, if you feel that one shot of espresso around, let's just say 70 milligrams of caffeine, or one green tea around 40 milligrams of caffeine is enough for you, you don't need to do more. So you might say, well, I want to drink more coffee. Okay, well then you might do an Americano, or you might do half decaf coffee. And I have a podcast on how to wean off caffeine. So I'm going to link that up for you today. Lots of shows on this because it's a touchy subject. Not touchy as in like it's controversial, although some people I think might feel that way if they are coffee and caffeine lovers. But a lot of the benefit comes from the antioxidants, again, which I talked about in yesterday's show. I didn't even name caffeine, but it's the number one place that people get their antioxidants right now. So that's why you're seeing a lot of benefit for cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's, diabetes. It's really not because you're getting massive amounts of caffeine in. It's because you're getting a lot of antioxidants in, and that helps the endothelial tissue and so much more. And so that's why, again, I'm not telling you not to drink coffee. I'm saying be careful on your upper limit of caffeine intake. You can still get the benefits by doing a decaf coffee. If you're doing decaf, always make sure it's organic and Swiss water processed, because if not, there's just going to be way too many chemicals. And then you can also check out my show on the healthiest ways to brew coffee, and that will certainly give you a one-up as well in terms of overall health. So in an ideal world, you're going to want to consume it after breakfast, certainly before noon or 1 o'clock. And the reason is that it can have up to about that 9.5 hour half-life. So if it's at noon, well, 9:30 p.m. for some people is where the final amount of that caffeine has actually been metabolized and removed from the body. So just think about that. Nothing, I would say, really after a lunchtime coffee. If you do a lunchtime coffee, could you do half decaf? Could you do all decaf? That might be nice. And then when you're having your AM coffee, try not to just spike it, spike that nervous system, that adrenaline first thing in the morning. Try to wait a while after waking, or have it after your breakfast for even better results, because it is going to slow that absorption. I'm going to link up a Harvard study from the Nutrition Science Division version that talks about the absorption of caffeine and a lot about what I shared here today. Because again, I always like to back everything up through good scientific research. All right, hopefully this was helpful. Thanks everyone for tuning in. I appreciate you. All those show notes again and studies are at stephencabral.com/2399. Take care.